Okay, my name's Simon Bowkett. I'm a rural chaplain here in the heart of Wales, mainly Carmarthenshire area, and I'm in 3 livestock markets a week in Llandyfri and Llandeilo, Fferbach, and then here Carmarthen Mart. I'm here twice a week normally, and basically we're here outside the walls of church. I'm a minister of religion, I'm a Christian minister, and we're here doing what we can in service of this rural community.
So what does your work involve?
So working with farmers, I'm basically involved a lot in listening to folk and their issues and their difficulties, trying to bring a bit of fun into the situation regularly in the mart. We have a fair bit of banter. That's one of the real perks of the job. The banter is very lively, and it's good to be part of that sort of context, really. Quite often folk will come in and they are taking time in a livestock market, hanging around a bit because they want to see people. Maybe they've been a bit lonely, isolated, things have been happening in the week. Sometimes they want to talk about it, sometimes they don't. I mean, if they want to talk, it doesn't go any further than me or one of our volunteers, obviously. But we're just there to sort of lift the load if we can and help people forward in what they've got to do in the course of their rural life and their work. Mainly involved in agriculture, of course, in these contexts.
And what issues do farmers face?
Okay, main issues that we're facing come under a couple of headings. There are sort of the old ones that have always been there and they're still there. There are the new ones, and there are very recent developments. So in terms of the old ones, we've always thought in terms of the problems being the 3 Bs. Banks, you've got to relate to banks, and bank managers don't always quite understand the context in rural business. Obviously it's sort of business where your income comes quite often in livestock in Wales. It comes twice a year maybe, or maybe once a year, and you've got to have a bank manager who understands all of that. So banks have been an issue. And then there's the issue of bureaucracy. Farming is a heavily regulated industry. People don't realise that very often, and it's regulation that normally comes from offices. It's very literate based, and our people have many gifts and talents, but they're not often the most involved in paperwork and reading and writing and filling in forms, so it's a big stress. And then there's the whole issue of bovine TB, which has been around a very long time and has always been a problem. But in the present, moving to the present issues and stresses, it's quite an issue. So characteristically at the moment, we're looking at problems with regulation again, we're back to bureaucracy, but we've got the Sustainable Farming Scheme that's come onto the scene in the last 7 or 8 years or so, being developed. That's created a lot of background pressures along with the old pressures in terms of what can and can't be done, but is being demanded in farm contexts around Wales. So that's an issue that's causing people a lot of pressure and trouble. Secondly, we've got the bovine TB policy that is now being followed and insisted upon in rural Wales, where people are having to live with a source of infection in their farmed environment, which is very real and is causing all sorts of problems, but is not allowed to be addressed in any successful, meaningful way, and that causes a lot of pressure on individual farmers. With Sustainable Farming Scheme, we're all in it together. But when it comes to bovine TB, it's your farm, it's your inheritance, it's your family business, and your loyalty to your ancestors, not letting them down by losing the herd. 1 week in this livestock market, fairly recently, I heard of 5 good herds that were going out, as a combination of all those issues and the new nitrate regs that are being brought in, the control of agricultural pollution regulations that are being applied across all the farms in Wales, when the Welsh Government's own advisory body said that should not happen, but just the farms that were creating a problem should be liable to those regulations. And there are farms going out all the time because there are farms where you cannot physically obey those regulations. Imagine the pressure. A lot of farms are able to do it, but they've got to spend a lot of money to be able to do it. And that's causing problems in that area for them as well. On top of that, you've got the recent financial pressures in the aftermath of COVID, where fuel has shot up in price. So a lot of fuel gets used on farms. And as a result of that, in consequence of that, feed prices have shot up. And of course, fertilizer uses sort of crude oil in the manufacturing process a lot as well. So the 3Fs: fuel, feed, and fertilizer. Huge pressures on farms. So I'm painting a picture of a really stressed out background in which a lot of farmers have had to diversify. So folk have gone to all manner of things, but mainly the thing that you can go to is to put a bit of extra work into your working week, which is already pretty full, and do some sort of tourist-related venture. And a lot of farms have done that. They've had to invest. You do have to put money into that, often borrowed to do it. And then you sort of put together a Airbnb, or you do something of that sort. You put some lodges up on the farm, or you put some, I don't know, wigwams, whatever you're going to do, right?
What has added to the challenges faced by local farmers?
Well, we've now got the issue of pressure being put on the diversifications, which are usually tourist-related, obviously, we've said. And the pressure's being put on there by putting a row of metal monstrosities through our beautiful landscape, which people are actually coming to those tourist facilities to see. And that means they're bound to be a great deal less likely to come. And obviously that's being perpetrated against the background where there is an alternative. We have got a local firm that is convinced that they can underground these cables. They're doing it elsewhere in the world at a competitive rate. We've also got the problem of people in Westminster who are responsible for UK government, junior ministers, saying this will all be done by pylons, that decision has been made. Now, that's huge pressure on a country like this where we're so reliant on that not happening, and where we have the technology to make sure it doesn't have to.
But does all this affect the value of farms?
And it's not just the diversification. The asset value of farms is affected by pylons going through to the detriment of about 35%. That means the valuation that's put on your farm by the bank, who is lending you all this money, has maybe already made you a big loan for a new dairy unit, a new rotary parlour, or whatever it happens to be. The bank manager is going to be on the phone now saying you got pylons through, the asset securing your loan is now 35% devalued because of those pylons going through, and now you're in trouble because you're in negative equity on your business.
So why is all this such a problem?
I think we've got a problem with the number of voters who live in rural areas as opposed to the number of voters who live in urban areas. And the effect of that is that our politicians tend to come from urban areas, tend to have no contact with agriculture, and as a result, the urban agenda is really being imposed on a rural setting. Now, there are fewer of us here, but the largest contributor, as I understand it, to Welsh GDP is food and agriculture. Now, if you're going to cut the throat of that, you're going to do your urban economy no good either, because there's no food for you to eat, that's the obvious one. No local food produced to the standards we wish to see, the welfare standards and the food hygiene standards and all the rest of it. Your food's going to be coming from good knows where. Peru, maybe. Walk through the co-op and see where it's all come from, okay? But if you want to maintain our stance on animal welfare, our stance on environmental standards, our stance on food hygiene, you're going to have to bring it from home. And what you're doing is you're threatening the family farms, which are already under a stack of pressure by this policy. Not for the benefit of your area, not even for the benefit of Wales, but for the benefit of others to whom this energy is probably going to be exported. Let's have the jobs back in Wales that use that energy.
So what's gone wrong?
So I think there are two things here. There's a failure in the scope of the economic impact assessment behind this policy, which obviously has to be done. And it's simply talking about we will compensate you for the trouble when we put the cables through, right? Yeah, but there's an ongoing cost. There's an ongoing cost in terms of access beneath pylons. There's an ongoing cost in terms of people coming across your land all the time. We're being told that biosecurity is the means to manage bovine TB, which is nonsense, obviously, if you've got wildlife passing through. Now we're going to have hordes of, hairy men coming through with their 4x4s and whatever to maintain this route of pylons. We're going to have a huge impact from that. It hasn't been quantified as far as I can tell. There's an opportunity cost because land that's under these things can't be used the way it would have been before, and there are all manner of costs like that to the rural economy. But I don't know if anybody's actually looked at the sociological impact, the social impact of any of this, in terms of the disruption of life in these communities by the impact of these pylons going through. There's a cultural impact, because if farms become less viable and have to be sold, the likelihood seems to be that they'll be sold to outside concerns, outside interests, and pass into corporate hands. Your local community will suffer from that because you won't have farms at the heart of their rural communities. For every pound in agriculture, we're told that £6 gets added to the local economy. Now, if that's gone with a big corporate from somewhere else, it's gone. What's the impact going to be on culture and language? You know, farming families, good farming families have been influences in their society. They've been the people backing the local school, backing the kids' trip to go to, I don't know, Folly Farm, whatever it happens to be, yeah? Those folks are contributors to the society. If these farms are coming under pressure to sell, you can expect more of them to be bought up by corporate interests, like land next to where I farm, bought to put trees on it to offset, so say, the carbon being expended in aviation. Now that's a huge social cost, and I just wonder if, as they really should, I believe, under the legislation, consider the well-being of future generations in the impact that this is going to have on society. I think they've taken too narrow a view of the damage, the harm that's going to be done. And it's all very well for these firms that are doing this to talk about chucking some money at the local village hall. That may or may not happen. It hasn't actually happened when it's been committed to in some of the cases with turbines in Wales, wind turbines. Well, is it going to happen? And what impact is that actually going to have to mitigate the loss in social terms within our communities?
We need some good news. How about cable ploughing?
Okay, so the thing about cable ploughing is this: it's minimally disruptive when it's being installed, and also at a time when it has to be maintained. The lines will need to be maintained, obviously, because as I understand it, it's going into a duct underground. So a machine will come through, it'll take a couple of days to go through and put the duct through, and then that's going to house cables underneath. As far as farming above ground there, as far as tourism above, obviously above ground, tourism above ground mainly, isn't it? As long as that's going on, it's not disrupted. So into the future, there's not that abiding impact of having a line of pylons, of having guys coming on with their trucks and their tractors and having access, taking your land out of production, bringing the threat of infection for your livestock from everywhere, compacting your soils, messing you about, which will go on with pylons for the lifetime of that installation. Now, people perceive that through the lens of what we know about cable ploughing anyway, which is a normal agricultural process on many farms. We know kit comes on, couple of days, does the job, goes away, end of. Job and yawn, boys, right? It's done, it's finished. But instead of that, we've got this installation going through that's going to be disruptive for the lifetime of that run of pylons. What's a run of pylons called? I don't know, no idea.